G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome to Chapter 2 of the Path of Exile Survival Guide. Today, we'll be crushing eggs, cracking crabs, dominating shrines, mastering missions, and generally slamming our way to the ledge. So now that we've killed Howrake and retrieved the medicine chest from Tidal Island, and returned it in exchange for a Quicksilver Flask, we're now going to head back to the waypoint in the coast that we claimed earlier. Now you'll notice that the map is looking a little bit fancy here in the Warbands League, the current challenge league that we're playing in, and that's because this signifies which Warband warriors will be encountering each zone. You can mouse over there and you can see Mewtwo hunters will spawn in this zone that we're heading into now. And that's kind of signified just visually by the effects around them as well. You can see the icy shards or the fiery flames in later zones that we have yet to encounter. So let's head into the coast. Now where we previously crossed the gap here into Tidal Island, where you can see you have to cross water to reach there, we can instead head to the right or down depending on the zone layout. I'm going to head to the right here and there'll be actually another doorway very close, very nearby to the other one. If you run much further than this, then you've probably gone in the wrong direction. Now this one heads into the mudflats, so we're going to go into the mudflats now. There's a few new things that we'll be encountering in this zone and some tougher enemies to deal with, so it should be pretty interesting stuff. So the first thing to look out for is the new mob type that will be spawning in here, your first encounter with rowers. Rowers are a particularly nasty avian species of flightless birds that will actually charge at your character and deal a large amount of physical damage when they hit you. The key to dealing with rowers is to sidestep their charges. It hits very hard, and the best defense against it is always to sidestep it. Once they do start charging, they're locked into a straight line charge, so the key is always to sidestep it. Now, you can interrupt their charge with an attack that stuns them as well. You stun in Path of Exile by dealing enough damage proportional to the enemy's health to make them reel back for a brief moment. We can see the stunning effect when we hit monsters, and they reel back for a moment. So you can interrupt a charge by ground slamming or by using any other attack that deals sufficient amounts of damage, but the safest tactic is always going to be to sidestep their charge. That becomes especially important later in the game when they do even more damage. So now what we've done is we've kicked over one of the rower nests, cruelly smashed their eggs to retrieve a glyph, the halitosis glyph. Not actually halitosis, but I've called it halitosis for as long as I can remember. And what we're going to do after retrieving that is we're actually going to follow each of these little creeks in the zone, and each creek will lead to another one of the nests. Now, there are different creeks that kind of head off into different areas, and it's pretty easy to tell which one's going to be the right one and which one's going to be the wrong one. This one that heads over to the left here is going to double back onto the wall, so it's essentially going to end. We can tell that it's going to hit the wall because that's actually the entrance where we entered. And the other one's actually heading towards kind of the ocean there, so it's heading towards the water. So it's not going to be in that direction. We're going to head inland. We're going to follow the creek inland. We're going to follow that, and we'll see the exclamation mark on the overlay map there as well. We can do the same thing to deal with these rowers here, just sidestepping their attacks. You see we can completely avoid all of their damage if we do make the effort to side slam them in such a fashion. So we're going to go kick over this next nest, grab the Rosius glyph, and now we've got 2 out of 3. We actually have to find one more. And the same trick applies. We're going to be heading towards the next nest. Now this one could be, there's a very small chance it could be left. I think it's going to be right. But first we've encountered something interesting over here. This is actually what's known as a shrine. This was originally introduced in another challenge league named Domination. And what shrines are, they're essentially like a capture point, or a kind of like an aura granting location that usually will have a bunch of monsters around it. So you can see there's a couple of zombies here, and there's a big pack of enemy rowers there. Now you'll notice that I actually went and clicked on the shrine, and I managed to claim the effect for myself. And that was kind of the feature of the Domination League. The idea was that monsters would have a powerful be surrounding a powerful shrine that you could try to run in and grab it, take the risk to get the effect for yourself, or you could slowly fight off the monsters and then grab the effect safely. I recommend, starting things out by grabbing it safely. This one I actually grabbed here is the Lightning Shrine, which spawns a Shock Nova spell around us. This is actually similar to a player skill that you can use, and does lightning damage in that sort of AoE around us. In addition to that, it actually leaves Shocked Ground, which causes the Shock status element to affect enemies. The Shock status element is usually performed by lightning damage, but it can be given through Shocked Ground effects like this. What that actually does is enemies that are shocked are more susceptible to incoming damage. They take 50% more damage. So we've now claimed the third and final of the glyphs. We'll be able to use this to open up an exit shortly, but we have some other business to attend to, because this map is packed full of interesting things. Now, the shrine spawn and this spawn are actually both randomized elements of the game that will just randomly spawn in different zones and you'll encounter them. And what we've encountered here is actually an NPC quest giver. Let's kill this champion pack first here, or this magic monster pack of zombies. So, as we know, these guys give a lot of extra experience and loot. These guys are just elemental resistance. Looks like one of them has group frenzy on death as well. Whenever one of these dies, they'll grant a frenzy charge, this little swirling green orb, to the enemies that cause them to attack faster and deal more damage. So I'm gonna grab that. I'm gonna grab that coral ring as well. We could equip this if we wanted to be tankier at this point, but I'll keep the iron rings on for now. We don't really need the extra life. We've achieved another level, so I'm gonna grab this melee damage just here, allocating that by control clicking. And then we're gonna talk to Haku, the armor master. Now, the Haku and many others like him that spawn randomly in zones like this with exclamation marks above their head are what's known as the Masters, or the Forsaken Masters. These were introduced in the previous expansion pack. And these guys will randomly spawn in zones and give you little side quests, randomized side quests, each of a different type of theme. So this is actually a complete extra area that spawned here in the mud flats just by chance. It's not always going to be here. It just happened to be here because Haku was there giving us that quest, so it actually spawned alongside of him. Now, Haku's quests have us fight through a gauntlet of different challenges, which can include enemy monsters and totems that spawn different abilities, to retrieve a spirit and then try and make it out alive. Now, this particular totem here is spawning an Ice Nova spell, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and run past before it activates again, and there are delays in between their skill use, so we can use that as kind of an opportunity to run past once it's finished doing its spell. So we'll run past here, try and get past this next one as well before before it starts going off again. And it looks like we've actually hit a dead end, so I'm actually gonna go back the other way. So let's head back over this way and hook around this way. We should try and kill any monsters we can on the way towards the end of this zone, because we will have to fight our way back, and it will be much harder. Well, in some of these missions it will be much harder to fight our way back, so the safest thing is going to be to kill them on the way. I took some of the damage from the Ice Novas there. You'll notice it did a pretty good amount of damage, and it also chilled us as well, slowing us down, so that can be a bit dangerous, especially when you're also surrounded by monsters. This one's a bit of a confusing layout, so we'll have to see if we can navigate here without getting too lost, because we'll want to make sure that we know our way out once we actually need to sprint out of here. It's kind of like, I guess if I had to describe these missions, they're kind of like Indiana Jones missions. We're going to go grab some relic and then try and escape as traps and explosions and things go off, and that's essentially pretty close to what's actually going to happen. So I'm going to kill these guys here, just make sure there's nothing in our way to block us in. And then we're going to head past. And there'll actually be a mini-boss at the end of this zone as well. Now these are kind of, these depend on the actual mission that you get given. This time we can actually kind of spy maybe at the edge of our screen who he is. If we can mouse over... Oh, there he is. No, is he here? No, there's actually no boss for this one. Okay. So this one didn't actually spawn with a boss. There'll often be a boss there. In fact, I would say there's most often bosses there. But looks like this one's actually going to be a pretty relaxed mission. Some of them, the spirit, once you pick it up, will actually revive monsters that you've killed previously. It will spawn additional monsters. Some of them will create explosions and other effects, so lots of different things can happen. This one seems like a relatively simple mission, and most likely because it's right at the start of the game. Usually for most features of Path of Exile, they start out simpler and get much more complex as you progress through the game and through the different difficulties. So now that we've completed that and returned the spirit to Haku, we can now talk to him, and we'll actually get some reputation experience with him. And this time he actually leveled up. It'll take a couple missions maybe to get him leveled up, and then once you have done a mission for him, you can actually go talk to him in town, and he'll vend various things, and later we can even talk to him and claim a hideout, which is essentially player housing. But we'll leave that for now. So from here I'm actually going to head out towards the left area, because we can continue on, but we do have a bit of a side mission that we can do as well. Talking to, I believe it was Tarkly in town, he gave us this mission here, a dirty job. Tarkly wants us to clear the Fetid pool. So I'm going to head out and follow these creeks. One of these creeks will eventually lead to our side mission. It could well be this one. Yeah, it looks like it was. Grab this chest on the way, of course, see if there's anything interesting for us. There's a gnarled branch that we could potentially use. Grabbing a two-handed weapon soon would be nice. My current weapon has a bit of increased physical damage though, so I'll stick with my current dual wielding of maces, but we'll try and pick up a two-handed weapon as soon as we can find a decent one. So this mission actually has us fully clear this particular zone, so we're going to be trying to purge all evil from within this zone. Pretty simple stuff, you can head just left or right, but just try and clear from the wall to the water without missing any mobs, so we're going to make sure that we kill everything we go past. Now, a bit of a trick as you're reaching kind of the end of this zone, you can actually type in your local chat /remaining, which is a command that will tell you how many mobs are remaining, and it'll tell you if there's less than 20 mobs remaining. So what I can do is I can type /remaining, and we'll see that it says more than 20 monsters remain, so we know we still have a long time to go. But you'll see once it says like 17, 15, so on, and you can work your way down to the last remaining mobs in the zone. Let's kill this rare just here. Managed to get a rare claw. This one's an interesting one. This could be somewhat useful for us. We can't actually ground slam with this, but we can gain benefit from the life gain on hit that it has there. So that means whenever we hit an enemy, we gain 6 life back. We can actually wield that with our mace in one hand and then our claw in the other hand, and kind of just hold onto the claw. A bit like it's a shield, kind of an advanced mechanic there. Let's work down these zombies. See if we find anything interesting along the way too. Apply our level there to some more melee damage. Just another rusted sword. I'll probably just take that back and vendor it. There's not much use in us identifying that. Now what's actually dropped for me here has been slightly highlighted by my loot filter, and this is actually what's known as a chromatic item. Now chromatic items are well worth collecting because they can be vended for an extra currency orb than what you would usually get by just vendoring a regular white item, or this can be done as magical or rare as well. But what this has is it has 3 linked sockets, and they're one of each color, so at least 3 linked sockets of one of each color, so red, green, and blue, all 3 linked. So that's what's known as a chromatic item, where we can actually sell that back to the vendor to receive what's known as a chromatic orb. Hence the chromatic item. Now there are some more rowers in here, skeletal this time, but they do pretty much the same thing. You saw that rare was particularly fast there. That one is actually got the quick affix on it, so this is a particularly quick monster, and that's one of the things that it spawned with as a rare monster. So same idea, we can just, if we're in melee range with them, they're not really going to charge. It's more just about closing that gap, watching out for that charge. And we've encountered a rather large pack of skeletal rowers here. I'm going to see if I can draw these guys away a little bit. No, we've angered the wrath of the zone boss of this zone, Kadavrus, the Defiler. This is our first encounter with a necromancer type enemy, and they do what you'd imagine, they actually raise the dead. Now, there's a few ways of dealing with this guy. The primary way is going to be to kill anything that is resurrected at the same time as dealing damage to him. So I'm using my AoE ability Ground Slam to try and damage him at the same time as damaging and killing the rowers around him. With him constantly spawning these rowers on top of us, they can keep charging at us, especially if we kind of move around as we go. And if we stand still, we can get hit by a bunch of their charges, as well as by some pretty powerful necromancer slaps, and we might find ourselves in trouble. But as you can see, I'm dealing with him pretty proficiently just by ground slamming and keeping those rowers under control at the same time as wrecking him. So not too hard, but if you do ignore those rowers, then things can get a little bit more difficult. I'll have a nice bath here in the waterfall while we're waiting. We actually found a large life flask, which is the next tier up from our medium life flask, obviously, and it was magical. This one actually removes freezes and chills. We've been subject to a few of those, so that should come in handy. We'll keep these medium life flasks until we've upgraded fully to large life flasks, at which point we'll discard them. And there's actually a second one there, so never mind that. Identified some boots here with a little bit of life on them. Life and resistances are high priority for any defensive gear while leveling. This one has a bit of life on it, so that's pretty good to use. It's more useful than the mana. What we are looking for, though, on boots is movement speed. Movement speed will be far more helpful than anything else we could get on boots in particular, making our character much more mobile. I've encountered some red blades, some red blade warriors from the Red Blade Warband, and these guys obviously, these guys mostly just use basic melee attacks, but they do have a bit of a fire theme to them and deal additional fire damage, and I believe that they have the potential of igniting us as well, which creates a fire damage over time effect. I'm a bit low on flasks overall, so I'm going to try and round them onto these zombies, kill the zombies at the same time, see if I can get some flask charges back. It's actually because I swapped my flasks out without refreshing them, but we managed to take them down anyway, and killing them did actually refill all of our flasks there at the same time. This rare zombie here has the life regeneration aura. This swirling red aura just around there, the 2 semicircles, represents the regeneration aura, which means that any damage that him or his allies take will actually be regenerated back pretty quickly. This guy here is actually armored and life regen himself, and you can see he's going to be actually a very tanky enemy, but we can use our single target to try and pick him off, and that'll actually get rid of the aura from around him as well. You'll see that the aura effect is lost on all of his allies. This next one has allies deal substantial extra physical damage, so their punches really hurt. Zombie punches actually hit very hard in Path of Exile as well, so this extra, substantial physical damage auras actually make them deal even more damage, even more frightening. This guy here is also powerful crits, so if he happen to get a critical strike, it could also be a very big hit. Things that don't make too much of a difference this early in the game, but good things to learn for the future. 3 monsters remaining, and this will be our final zombie kill just there. So we can actually just use a teleport scroll now, or we can head back out. It's up to us. I'll head back because we actually have a bunch of items to sell and organize as well. Here I'm getting the Born to Fight notable passive skill. Notables are these larger circles and usually have a bit more flavor to them and more effects, whereas these are just basic passive skills. We have basic passive skills, notable passive skills, and then actually keystones, which are even larger with these gold borders. Keystones will often have a drawback to them and will have a much more influential effect on your character. Notables will just be a significant boost to your character and don't usually have a drawback. This one here just gives attack speed and a large amount of physical damage as well as some strength. Strength in Path of Exile also converts to life as well. 20 strength actually equals 10 extra life on our character, in addition to some extra physical damage. So now that I've cleared out the Fetid pool, Fatakli has given us a Book of Regret. We can use this book here to get some passive respecs. So in Path of Exile, your passive skill tree is fairly locked in, but you can make small modifications with these refund points. You get refund points through a variety of quests throughout the game, and you get quite a few of them by the end of the game, but you also can get them through a currency orb known as an Orb of Regret. So you can essentially invest wealth into respecing your character if you want. Typically, high-level characters that, if you're playing on a high-level character and you really want to play something completely different, then you'll actually just roll a new character. You'll start a new character, perhaps on a different class even. But if you want to take your Groundslam Marauder who's using maces and turn him into like another two-handed style Marauder that uses Cyclone, for example, then you might just use some Regret Orbs and just change around a few of his passives to make him more suited to his new build. So you notice the first thing when I sell this chromatic item here, we do get the Chromatic Orb. Chromatic Orbs can actually be used to recolor the sockets on an item. So let's say we find a particularly nice item, but we really need an extra red socket to equip one of our skills. We can actually right click and use the Chromatic Orb on the item to change the colors of the sockets. It is randomized, but it is sort of based on the type of item that you're using. So evasion-based items are known as dexterity items, and they'll be more likely to get green sockets. And strength, armor-based items will get red sockets, and blue energy shield-based items will get blue sockets, more likely. It is somewhat random, but there are some sort of leaning towards certain colors on their sockets. So I'm going to store pretty much everything that I don't need in my stash at the moment, just control clicking them to click them over very quickly like that. And I will also keep this particular flask here, or any flask like it. This is a superior flask, and you'll see it has 9% quality on it in this case. Now, quality on flasks will either increase the duration with things like Quicksilver flasks, or it'll increase the amount that is restored, as with this life flask here. Now, quality flasks can actually be used in another one of those vendor recipes, and what happens in this case is you sell 40% total quality to a vendor, so you could have like 5 or 6 or 7 flasks that equal up to 40 or more percent, and you'll get what's known as a glass blower's bauble. This is similar to a blacksmith whetstone. It applies quality to flasks in particular. So I'll go ahead and store these in one of these other tabs, and I'll start a collection of these guys because I'll vendor these all together later to get some more glass blowers. Regular flasks that we don't need to upgrade to the next tier though. As you can see, I already have large life flasks. I'll just get rid of, I don't really need. So I can either return to my portal down here, which is down on the beach, and go back from the Fetid pool, or I can just go to the waypoint on the coast. I'll just take the waypoint on the coast. It's less walking, essentially. And we can just go back into the mud flats. At this point, it shouldn't have reset. Even though this coast section has reset, since it's been a while since we've been here, I'll just head down and go back to the mud flats. We have a bit of a fight to attend to before then, though. These guys are in a lower level zone. Each zone in Path of Exile has its zone level, and this usually slowly increases as you level. Hold on though, hold your horses, we got ourselves a unique. Unique is the highest rarity tier of item in the game, so we've seen normal items, we've seen magic items, and we have seen rare items. I don't think I have any rares at the moment. We have seen some rare items though, and then after that there is uniques. Uniques have a bunch of flavor and they'll often have interesting different extra effects. This one here is a Raku Tiki, which is a life regeneration, fire-resistant, life-based amulet. Not a very powerful amulet in the grand scheme of things, but at this point it's actually pretty nice because it has a large amount of life on it and a large amount of fire resistance too. So we can grab that, and it has the life regeneration implicit. I'm totally gonna use that. Nice find, nice find. This is a magical gnarled branch as well. Check this out. 44% increased physical damage. Wow, that's actually really good. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and equip that. So that's a two-handed weapon, which we've been looking for. Maces and staves can be used to ground slam with. So we can use this, and with that 44% increased physical damage, that's actually gonna deal a whole butt ton of damage. So we're gonna go ahead and equip that. Now, I was explaining zone levels. Each zone in Path of Exile has a zone level, and you can see that on the map just here, or you can open up your overlay map and you can see it just up in the top right here. So this is monster level 4, and that means that it's essentially a zone level 4. And as you can see, like, each of the different zones have their own zone level, and they progress as we move through the game. Now, this determines the strength of magical modifiers that can roll on gear that drops in these zones, and it also determines the difficulty of the monsters too. So if you go back to earlier zones that you've already been in, your character will have progressed a great deal, and your character will be able to basically smash everything in there. Especially now that we found this beastly staff just here. Do you guys smell that? I smell something putrid. It is the putrid stench of Oozeback Bloom. This is the unique boss, the zone boss of this zone, and he's actually a unique rower. And you'll notice that even though he's not touching us, he's actually slowly killing us. And that's because this guy has a Chaos Degeneration aura. It's a damage over time aura around his character. And when we're basically within a certain range of him, I'll try and move out of range of it. We're actually taking that chaos damage. Now, chaos is, it's not an element, but it is kind of like another extra type of damage. And we have fire, cold, lightning, and then chaos damage. So we can actually resist chaos damage, just like we can resist fire, cold, and lightning damage. But at this point in the game, we don't really have any resistance towards this, so it can slowly degenerate our character. Otherwise, he's just a standard rower. He is a little bit hard to hit, and he's a little bit accurate, so he can do quite a bit of damage. But you just have to kill him quickly to avoid that Chaos Degeneration aura. With our crazy new high life unique and our high damage stuff, you can see we took him down very quickly, though. No problems whatsoever. So now that we've done everything that we need to do in this zone, which was quite a dense zone full of action, we're going to either head to the top side or the right-hand side, and we'll encounter another one of these cliff faces here. And eventually, as you're walking along, you'll find this little inlet, and on your map will appear this orange section here, which is our next way through. We're going to put the glyphs that we found earlier in this wall here, just by clicking on it. This will actually open the Submerged passage, which has completed a quest and given us access further in the game. Now, from here, we can just cross this little bridge here, and there will be another waypoint that we can activate to save our progress once again. We went through quite a few bits of content there without really getting a waypoint, but most of that was extra side content, and a lot of the time you can just grab the glyphs and just skip straight ahead to Submerged Passage. There's no real need to do passive respec side quests like the one where we did clearing the Fetid pool, even though it's a bit of fun. There's not really much reason to do it unless you actually need those respec points, which we won't for some time. So at this point, we're going to talk to Tarkly and get our next quest reward. We actually have quite a few choices here, and some of them are pretty decent options. We have Decoy Totem, we have Molten Shell, Reckoning, and Vigilant Strike. Of course, if you're playing a different class, you'll have different options entirely. For my character here, I'm actually going to take Decoy Totem. This allows us to summon a little totem that will shout at our enemies and distract them, essentially. Sounds very strange, and it is kind of strange, but he is awesome. He is awesome, and he makes fighting tough enemies much more easy because he distracts them and takes a lot of the damage. He basically acts as a little portable tank for us. Now this is a good chance to explain gem vendors. In Path of Exile, whenever you complete a reward that grants you a gem as a reward, a skill gem, you can actually go in that same town and buy from one of the vendors. In this case, it's Nessa. Usually it's the one that sells potions, flasks, and currency orbs, and rings, and amulets, and stuff like that. You can go to their second tab here, and you can actually purchase any of the gems you didn't take, and some extras too. So in that case, we took Decoy Totem, and let's say instead we wanted to take Molten Shell, which we didn't end up taking. We could actually just buy this here for a scroll. They're very cheap early on, and they stay pretty cheap pretty much throughout the whole game as well. In this case, I'm going to, I think I'll buy Molten Strike, which was the other skill that we didn't take earlier, and I'm going to use this instead of Heavy Strike. Heavy Strike's a very good single target, it hits very hard, it packs a wallop, but Molten Strike I quite like. What it does is in addition to hitting the monster, it actually fires out a bunch of projectiles that will then hit the same target as well once they fall to the ground. So it's a pretty powerful single target skill. They have a few options with what to do with any skills that you're not currently using. You can leave them equipped in your gear so that it continues to gain experience and level up, and eventually their little plus symbols will pop up here and we can click them to level. Otherwise, we can store them in our stash, just in case we want to come back to them later. Obviously, they won't gain any experience if they're sitting in our stash, but if we don't really plan on using them, then it's not a big deal. And we can always go ahead and rebuy a skill from one of these gem vendors, and they actually partially level up with our character as well here. You can see I can buy a level 3 Heavy Strike, because this is based on our character level. Having finished up in town, we're now going to head back to the Submerged Passage waypoint that we recovered earlier. And from here, we're going to continue down. There's actually two ways that you can go. You can progress onwards to the ledge, or you can actually do a side quest that'll grant us an extra passive skill point. Now in this case it's worth doing because it actually gives us an active skill point that we can spend on our character to improve our character's strength, not just a regret or a respec point. So there's a few ways you can navigate this zone, but any complex zone, as an easy to remember fallback, it's just stick to one outside wall. So in this case I'm going to pick the left wall, and I'll show you how this is basically a foolproof strategy. If we stick to this left wall, we're eventually going to encounter one of the exits. Now, we are kind of looking out for two things here. We're either looking for a downstairs section, which is where we're looking to go for the side quest, or if we see a kind of like a bridge that leads upwards, then we can take that to head down to the ledge. In this case, we do want to go down first, so we'll make sure we try and find that first. And if we do find the stairs that lead upwards, then we'll head back and see if we can find the downstairs area first. I'm going to press Z to hide my loot there. Whenever loot's sort of filling up the screen a bit too much and you're having trouble seeing, you can just tap that Z to hide it. Found a bit of currency there. A rare helmet, I'll pick that up. And also pick up that blue rustic sash as well, since our current one we're using is just a normal one, so we'll go ahead and identify that. We got a bit of fire resistance, which is quite nice. The energy shield doesn't really do much for us. We'll give that crab a bit of wallop, level up my skill gems, which does increase their power. And then I'm going to equip this one here. It's got a bit of life on it. Our current one doesn't have anything, so we'll just go ahead and drop that. We don't need to keep white items around. Rustic sashes can come in handy, and for now I'm going to keep one aside, because it could come in handy for another vendor recipe later that I'll explain once it becomes relevant. Got another shrine here. I'm going to pop my Quicksilver and run on in to grab it for myself, and I'll turn its effects over to my enemies instead. Well, I'll turn it over to my side and use it to take out my enemies. So still following the left wall, and I actually ended up at the Flooded Depths. Again, if you come to a sort of a bridgy section that heads upstairs, then you may want to explore other options until you find the Flooded Depths entrance. So in this zone, we do get to encounter a new type of mob, the Drifting Eyes. These guys have a bit of a charge-up, lightning-based laser attack, and it's very easy to avoid. Once they start charging, they're actually locked into that direction, so you can just basically take a step to the side and they'll miss you. But if you do stand there and take that hit, and I'll demonstrate for you guys, ever being the guinea pig, we actually become blinded. You'll notice that the darkness encroaches around us, and that blind effect actually makes our character far less accurate, so we'll be likely to miss most of our attacks against the enemies. Now, those attacks do a little bit of damage, and the blind can be a little annoying, but it's not too much to worry about. And because they're so easy to dodge, you can basically, as long as you're, stepping between your attacks and staying mobile, which is always a sound strategy in Path of Exile, then you won't really have any problems. We've now attained level 8. I'll go and finish these guys off here. I'll actually upgrade my other mana flask. Always keeping an eye on your flasks, guys. Always making sure that they are as up to date as possible. And if you've gone for ages without finding a drop, actually purchasing one from the vendor in town is not a bad idea. I'm going to finish this guy off here. We're actually running out of mana. What a noob. And then I have a couple of options. First, we're going to go down and get the life. Life and defenses in Path of Exile are very important. It's a tough game. There's a lot of incoming damage, and you need to be able to survive that damage because a dead character deals no DPS. So we're going to go ahead and grab these two life nodes first here, Heart of the Warrior and Life. Heart of the Warrior being a notable with a ton of extra life on it as well. So we'll go grab these, and then we'll continue on our DPS rampage with some of those damage passives. We can apply the same strategy to this zone, just sticking to the left wall as I have here, and eventually you'll be forced to cross a bridge into the kind of this little, well, let's just say a boss area, because that's what it is. And as you'll see, we have now encountered the zone boss for the Flooded Depths, the Deep Dweller, aka the Granddaddy Crab. Now he has two forms like all of these other crabs that we've been fighting. The first one is a melee form, so you can simply kite him with your ground slam attacks, nice and easy. This guy can hit pretty hard, and he does have extra cold damage, so he can chill and freeze your character as well. However, once you knock his outside shell off, he actually goes back to ranged attacks, some dealing a lot of extra cold damage, and also he has a bit of a barrage there as well. You'll notice he'll do a kind of a spray of fire. If you're standing next to him when he does that attack, you can actually take a whole bunch of extra damage. I'm going to use my Molten Strike, my new single target attack, to finish him off with no problems there. We are absolutely carving through content at the moment. So having finished off the Granddaddy Crab, I'm going to take a portal scroll shortcut back to town. What we're going to do is go turn in this quest and receive our passive point reward, which will be over here from Tarkling. So you managed to kill the Granddaddy Crab, that is right. Let's go ahead and right-click that book there and apply our next passive, which will be on the Heart of the Warrior. This gives us a flat life, which is the same as what you would find on gear, like our Raku Tiki here, which has a whole bunch of life on it. And then percentage increased maximum life, which scales that flat life even higher. So it's a very nice passive there. You saw we got like something like 50 extra life there on our character. So a big increase in defensiveness. Now you can take your portal back, or you can take your waypoint. It's pretty much the same distance to run most of the time. So we're going to take our waypoint back here, and we're going to kind of head in a slightly different direction to what we had before. So last time we followed the left wall. I'm going to hang out to the right here. Oh, and look what we've bumped into! The Brood Princess! The Brood Princess, I believe, is the first sea witch we actually encounter here. And these sea witches, they do a waved base attack. Now this does cold damage in kind of a narrow area in front of them, and just like previous tactics with Glacial Cascade, we can just sidestep it. There's a bit of a wind up on it, so once you see them kind of raise their arms up and start sending that wave out, it travels pretty slow as well. Just sidestepping is enough to completely avoid that. Of course, if I do take the damage, my character will take some damage. It can potentially become chilled as well. But at this point, we are destroying it just by having focused on finding some life on some gear and trying to find a decent two-handed weapon with some extra damage on it. We're able to easily carve through any of these little zone bosses at this point. Champion Pack of Crabs here. Always try to get in the habit of checking the modifiers on magic monsters and rare monsters, and get to know which ones are the dangerous ones. In this case, these guys have extra damage. That can be particularly dangerous, especially on mobs that already deal high damage. These little crabs aren't too much of a problem here, but extra damage can be really nasty on certain mobs that already do a lot of damage, especially if they have elemental damage as well, because that can mean that their elemental effects that can occur, such as chills and freezes for ice, burns for fire damage, and shocks for lightning damage, can actually be all the more potent. I'll use this as an opportunity here on this rare crab to actually show my Decoy Totem as well. I'm going to go ahead and put this on my number 3 button, and we can simply pop that totem down, and you'll start doing these cries, and you'll look. Basically, all of the crabs have gone to attack him. So what does that mean? We can just freely wallop them, essentially. So we can use this as an opportunity just to heavily mitigate any incoming damage and completely distract them from us, which works very nicely. Anytime you're feeling a little uncomfortable, pop that Decoy Totem down, and he'll be your bro, aka your Decoy Broton. The Chromatic Item, I'll grab that. Using the Decoy Totem to distract the Warband's warriors while we deal with them as well. Of course, sometimes they will wisen up and turn around and attack us, but even if it's only absorbing 50% of attacks, it's still 50% of damage we don't have to take. There's another rare gnarled branch, but our magical one, I think, will actually be better here. This is a good chance to actually show that rarity isn't everything. Sometimes it just comes down to the basic stats of an item. So something with life and resist, even if it's magical, could be better than a rare item with a bunch of kind of stats that don't really make much difference. In this case, this staff is not very good. It doesn't really have much that helps us. A little tiny bit of added cold damage, spell damage is not useful. Whereas this one that's only magical has actually 44% increased physical damage, heavily scaling its base physical damage. So in this case, the less rare item is actually far better. Continuing out until we reach the final doorway here to the ledge, you'll notice that we did travel up a little stairway section there. That was when we were fighting that rare crab, if you didn't notice earlier. And we're going to head out to the ledge next. The ledge is a very straightforward zone. You can essentially just run in the middle of it like this. There'll be water on one side and some cliffs on the other. It's quite scenic, really. And in this area, we'll be dealing with some spoopy skeletons. In addition to the cannibals we've already fought, we have a mixture of melee skeletons which just use regular default attacks, and some bow skeletons as well that just shoot arrows at us. Very simple stuff. You can bypass much of the ranged attack damage just by sidestepping frequently. Sidestepping allows you to avoid the vast majority of damage in Path of Exile, especially from ranged attackers. We've actually encountered some gulls in here as well, which doesn't always happen, but these gluttonous gulls are fairly interesting. You'll notice I just killed one and they stopped fighting me to eat the corpse of their companion and actually spit it back out at us. It's pretty gross. But these guys will consume corpses and use them as ammunition to shoot at you, and these projectile attacks they shoot out create a gory explosion that can actually deal quite a bit of physical damage. So there's a few ways of dealing with these guys. You can try and deal with them first before there's any corpses for them to feed on, or you can actually kill some and then take advantage of the fact that they eat the corpses. They prioritize eating corpses to kill them. So if you attack them while they're consuming a corpse, they'll obviously not be doing any damage to you. So you can take advantage of kind of their hunger. We've reached level 9 here. I'll go ahead and kill these skeletons, make the area safe, and then we'll start heading over into this melee damage as well. I'm going to go up to Butchery, which increases our damage with two-handed weapons and our attack speed. Eventually, we'll reach a waypoint here in the center of the ledge, and sadly, that is the end of episode 2 for the Path of Exile Survival Guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it enlightening. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. And if you have any friends you'd like to help get into Path of Exile, then feel free to share this series with them. That is it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.